Sorry about the mess.
Right, let's talk about something I've wanted to talk about on this channel for a while now. Movies, where after entering an empty cinema on opening day and staring open-mouthed at half an hour of Dwayne "The Rock" fucking Johnson ads, I saw the new Star Wars movie. And it's alright. It's alright. I'll admit I didn't go in with a lot of good faith, and I'll explain why in a moment, but for now I'll give you a relatively spoiler-free review. If you haven't seen it, and you want to go in completely fresh, I'll leave a timestamp in the description below.
Get ready!
Solo, a Star Wars story, isn't brilliant. It's also not awful. Accounting for production values, it sort of sits somewhere around high-quality mediocrity. Alden Ehrenreich, Third Reich, isn't Harrison Ford, and Donald Glover isn't Billy Dee Williams, but sometimes I can believe they are, particularly when they're standing in bad lighting. They're fine. The supporting characters can be interesting. They're fine. The new Millennium Falcon is fine. The new locations are fine. They're all
Fine. We're fine.
I mean, if it sounds like I'm taking the piss, it's not intentional. That's honestly how I see the film. I've gushed about my fandom of Star Wars in the previous video, but I'd be a bad fan and a bad critic if I couldn't call something underwhelming when it's underwhelming. Nothing that stood out from the film that was fresh or new, whether it was the latest of many Falcon chase sequences we've seen, or a musical score that is lifted directly, not paid homage to, lifted directly off a previous Star Wars film. There was maybe one moment when I was genuinely surprised, a scene in the film near the end that is utterly shameless fan service, and if you've seen the film you know exactly which scene I mean. By contrast, there was no point in the film where the thought entered into my head, what the fuck am I watching? Which I've seen in a couple of films that people mistakenly thought were good. That's my metric for actual bad quality. I'm someone who gets absorbed into films at the moment and generally watches them on their terms, so if you ever make me break my suspension of disbelief to marvel at your plot holes, bad dialogue or ludicrous contrivances, you've objectively made a bad film, Wonder Woman.
Peace is only an armistice. Meaning, a chance to rise above his petty, mortal little self.
Right, okay. This guy just fucking told her the whole plot. This fucking Christopher Hitchens lookalike just walked up to a woman he's never met and just told her, yeah, this piece treaty that's about to happen, jokes. But I know you'll keep this just between us because I have no idea who you are. Also, that's not dancing. It's not dancing, it's like two cripples trying to hold each other up. Why is nothing in this movie any good? Yeah, I didn't have a cringe moment like that. But I was rarely excited either. And it's also the first Star Wars film that's come out in my lifetime that I won't buy an extra cinema ticket for. It's acceptable fan service. But that's probably a comfort for fans after the utter shit show that was The Last Jedi. See, here's what's interesting. A lot of people are unhappy with the newer Star Wars films trading on nostalgia over anything else, particularly a near obsessive parroting of the original trilogy. And yet when a Star Wars film tries something unusual or a bit out of left field, its fans lose their minds. I've asked a fair number of people why they dislike The Last Jedi, and I get responses ranging from SJW propaganda, poor CGI, bad direction, bad acting, bad writing. Yes, The Last Jedi is thought of as having poor writing and acting by the same people who have nostalgia bonus for a film with moments like this.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like here. Here everything is soft.
What? Sure, The Last Jedi has its problems, but to look back at the prequel era of the franchise at a time when both critics and fans alike were disappointed, as a better time indicates to fans having conflicting expectations, which is understandable for such a big franchise, but I think the success of the relatively conservative and fan-friendly Solo compared to the controversial Last Jedi indicates two things to me. Number one, the people who grew up with the prequel era, people like me, have grown up and make up the dominant audience of these films now, and I would argue that this generation sees Star Wars differently from those that saw the original trilogy. Rather than a contained story about a handful of characters, it instead becomes a galaxy-sprawling epic with access to different cultures and worlds within this universe. And in this sense, the Star Wars universe is for them more than simply a contained and well-told story. The world building that the prequels did was a lot of people's first taste of a science fiction universe teeming with life and variation and avenues of exploration. Things like unusual aliens, alien sports, politics, narcotics, lifestyles, mythology, and the spectacle implied by the original trilogy were shown in detail for the first time. And while most people saw it as needless exposition, in some cases universally, it gave my generation the rules from which they could live and create within this world, rules to adhere to, bend and break. Younger minds had a clearer roadmap on how to realistically imagine themselves within this universe, and the possibilities resulting from that immersion and attention to detail were far wider. That's the reason that there is more canon Clone Wars material than could possibly fit within the 3-year time span of that, because people's imaginations ran wild. Now, George Lucas has his faults, but he dedicated himself to showing a galaxy as rich and diverse and alive as it could possibly be, and that's testament to his appreciation and capacity for imagination. It's the reason why some kids know the Star Wars galaxy better than they do our own world.
May have gone too far in a few places.
Lord, it's a miracle!
And contrast that to the new trilogy. We have a handful of planets, none of them particularly interesting, none of them particularly striking, that serve specifically as plot points, and none of the old locations such as the famous Tatooine are even mentioned. The wider galactic context makes no appearance. We're given snatches of or no backstory in several major characters.
Who the fuck are you?
And even the stars of the original trilogy are tight-lipped about how after 30 years we've ended up back to square one. The original trilogy could get away with certain things like this, certain things that were implicit or unseen. It was a new universe and we were all along for the ride. Concepts like evil empires and magic emperors are fairly self-explanatory. That's why when Starkiller Base fires, I have no idea why I'm supposed to care. I don't know these people. Yeah, I'm sure that's scary in that, but I'm looking at Rey and Kylo fan art on my phone now. I'm not sure why I should care. Alright, bye. When Alderaan was destroyed, we knew the stakes. It was Princess Leia's home, a character we've come to recognise as being brave and defiant in the face of mortal danger. She is blackmailed, and even when she apparently capitulates, billions of people are killed anyway. Something that it's made fairly clear was the cost of her defiance.
In a way, you have determined the choice of the planet that'll be destroyed first.
A grandiose statement of cruelty and ruthlessness. We understand that from a baseline emotional and storytelling level, even if we're not given the wider context. That's why that moment is iconic, and why this one makes no sense.
Bow to the First Order!
If we stick to Princess Leia for one more example, there is that moment when she uses the Force to pull herself back to the bridge of that Resistance cruiser when Keanu Reeves blows it up. Having had no serious ability with the Force up until that point, suddenly, unconscious and in the vacuum of space, she reveals for the first time that she's actually quite powerful, something that's never hinted at or even built up to. It's one thing if you show hints of it, such as her using her heightened senses more frequently, or even a blink and you'll miss it moment where she uses the Force to pick something up minor, like a cup or something. But to pull a contrivance like that so suddenly comes across as a dangerously cheap way of being subversive. This isn't nerdy nitpick bullshit here. This is a case of world building. It's not bad lore, it's bad storytelling. The prequels felt like a large cast moving around a large mall of people with all sorts of ideas, cultures and colours coming around and blending in, from the traditional to the ridiculous to the contrived. The newer trilogy sometimes feels like a small group of people dodging around each other in an empty parking lot, so I can understand why, even if the films are technically better, many feel that some of what's coming out now feels lifeless.
It wasn't me, sir. Then it had to be you. Yes, it was me, sir, but don't get too mad.
Number 2 is something a growing number of people are talking about, most notably on Reddit, and that issue is oversaturation. It took George Lucas 27 years to make 6 films. 7 if you're not nostalgic. If you saw a Star Wars film, you would be waiting for a while to see what happened next. It will take Disney 6 years to make as many films. I'll never forget how only months after the hype from Rogue One was dying down, we got a trailer for The Last Jedi. 9 months from release. On top of that, they're planning multiple TV series, live action and animated. In addition, a 4th trilogy has already been planned. Remember, this is a company that has probably only now just worked out how the current trilogy is going to end. That's oversaturation. Yeah, I love Star Wars. A lot of people love Star Wars. It's the core of who I am today, for better or for worse. But I'm already exhausted just listing the things they've got planned. But worse, it's oversaturation without a plan. Listening to the behind the scenes commentary of these 2 films and looking at their direction, there's no overriding narrative, there's no plan, there's no story, there's no vision. It's just to make movies, make toys, make games, and obviously more money. And I'm going to hear defenders of this bring up Marvel. Yes, Marvel brings out more movies per year and has done so for longer. But the critical difference is both vision and creative freedom. I don't get tired of Marvel movies because it's a different cast of characters with every subsequent movie. And even then, no 2 movies are alike in tone or substance. The Avengers is nothing like Iron Man, which is nothing like Captain America, which is nothing like Guardians of the Galaxy, which is nothing like Black Panther, which is nothing like Ant-Man, which is nothing like Thor. And even the sequel to Thor, The Dark World, is nothing like Thor, The Dark World. But on top of that, the plan was set up from the very beginning. The whole plot arc around the Infinity Stones and being divided into phases shows that Marvel planned out its movies and the basic substance of them long before the cameras started rolling. This is something that its competitor Warner Brothers has yet to learn. Making movies just to cash in without a plan or reason will cost you the soul of your franchise, and we, the audience, can see it, Wonder Woman! As I said, Solo isn't a bad movie, and it's certainly worth seeing once, but a constant stream of media like Solo, made purely to satisfy fans, take few risks, and very little else, is exactly the kind of thing that turns once legendary icons into barren, vapid cash grabs. It's the logic that explains why Fast and Furious turned into a cheap Tom Clancy knockoff, why Minion toys are everywhere, and why people still think it's a good idea to fuck around with dinosaurs. Solo is not raking in the cash, and though this is just my theory, I suspect it's simply overabundance more than anything else. It's an easy thing for a company that breathes in nasty stacks like Disney to avoid, but it won't. Because it can't. Because Disney has never needed to learn death by excess. And deep down, that's what all of our childhood movies become. That's the ultimate endpoint of enduring popularity and value. Self-perpetuation for self-perpetuation's sake. It wasn't that long ago when lining up to see a Star Wars film was a special can't miss occasion, if for no other reason that A, it didn't happen very often, and B, there might not be that many of them. Now it's another one. And the more frequently we get exposed to this venerated and iconic IP, we slowly begin to realise that there really isn't a plan, or some great story, or some epic conclusion or truth at the end, and that Star Wars isn't really that profound, that midi-chlorians are canon, that Laura Dern and Jar Jar exist, that Darth Vader hates sand, that pregnant women can lose the will to live, that Ewoks can beat the Empire, and that some characters should just stay dead. You can have too much of a good thing, and I say this as an experienced alcoholic, aka an Australian. Sometimes a little abstinence makes the heart grow fonder. Just ask Johnny Depp.
Thank you.